immediately scheduled a trip, a commercial trip to the Grand Canyon the next October. Well, I'd never been in the Grand Canyon backpacking. We went into the Grand Canyon on a primitive trail. I led 6 people into the Grand Canyon. And I'm having to constantly adjust their shoes and treat blisters, and everybody's down in front of us. And I can see them all down in front of me. And God just speaks, just clear as day, and says, this is what you're made for.
Hey, welcome to the Man Up Podcast. I am so excited today. I've got a guest all the way from North Carolina. He came to God's country here in Southern Illinois, just flew in.
That's debatable.
And I have Mr. Mark Folk with us from New Wilderness Adventures. I'm going to let him kind of tell his story. A couple of things that were very intriguing. I know he used to be in the Chick-fil-A world, which we model so much of culture as an inspiration from them. Avid outdoorsman, obviously, not to tell all of his story. I know there's a strong ministry background. Mm-hmm. And I'll kind of tell you how I ended up crossing paths with Mark. When we did our Man Up Adventure Camp last year, I felt like there's a couple of things there's 2 or 3 things we need to institute before the next year. One was I wanted to write a book that we could provide the following year that was kind of a guidebook that, would just be another resource, not just a one-time event, but guys that were really impacted and they're going back hopefully into their local churches. Maybe there'd be something else we could put in their hand. 2, we wanted to start this podcast so we could kind of have an ongoing voice of things that were helpful just for men. And then the third one, which we haven't done yet, is like, wow, if a couple of times a year we could take guys out on an adventure, whether that's bear hunting or trout fishing or whatever the case might be, it would be an opportunity for guys that came to the camp to reconnect, instead of having to wait a year, because we had guys come from all over the country. Or if we had guys that would have no interest in coming to an adventure camp because they thought it was too religious, we could get them to go, and then around a campfire, we could recreate kind of the magic that happens on the campfire at a Man Up Adventure Camp. And so that led me to begin to get online and somebody's got to be doing something similar. What could we learn from? And that's how I found Mark. And I reached out to him, found out he had a guide school, and that's what really intrigued me. He was very gracious, took my phone call, and we began to talk. And out of that has kind of developed a friendship. First time we've met in person today. Man, I'm excited to hear about your journey.
Well, I just shared it on the road here with your son, so I don't mind sharing it. And, Terry, the video you saw, the website that you saw has really connected us this year with a lot of people. And so to be able to share my story and to share about New Wilderness Adventures and what we're doing, you mentioned the guide training. And that's kind of new direction. It's old, but new, in that we are kind of redirecting our efforts. I'm 63 years old, and Barry Strickland, who's on our staff, he's 70 plus, and another guy's in his 60s. And we were sitting around a few years ago saying, well, we don't really see retirement in the future. We're serving the Lord, and so we need to think about what the future is. And I said, well, we had a guide training program back in 2006. Maybe that's where we need to go. And it was good enough for Jesus. He took 72 and trained them and to go out and into the towns and communities and share the gospel and heal the sick and raise the dead and cast out demons. So let's kind of follow that example. So
worked pretty good for him.
Yeah, it worked pretty good for him. And so we completely, have gone from, we're still doing events, but we're really focusing on creating men's pastors out in the world, out in the community, and that love the wilderness, love adventure, and have never who feel a calling. I want to serve God, and combining those 2 things together, that's pretty cool. And it's been really fun, and it's attracted a lot of guys that are, hey, I never thought about doing this as a ministry. I always dreamed of it. I thought about it. Tell me how to do it.
Yeah, so isn't it interesting? I think that so many people that feel this tug on their heart, like maybe there's a call on my life for some kind of ministry aspect, and we try to force that, into a box. Yeah. Like, I don't know if I want to live overseas. I don't know if I want to be a traveling evangelist. I guess I'm going to be a pastor.
Yep.
And then we figure out that none of those things fit. It's almost like the Saul's armor kind of thing.
Yeah, it is.
So many men give up there, but you didn't. And so tell a little bit about that story, because I thought that was intriguing about you.
I had a really good dad. I had a really good mom and dad, and that ever since I was a kid, man, they were. I honestly, I mean, I wanted to build a submarine one time. Me and a friend of mine, and I went to we were kids, 13, 14 years old. And we loved Jacques Cousteau. I said, let's build a submarine. Oh, yeah. And I go to my dad and said, we kind of want to build a submarine. He said, oh, I went to school with a guy who's a submarine designer. He gets me the guy's phone number, and the guy calls me. That's how my dad was. It wasn't like, are you crazy, son? And that was kind of my life. And the other thing is that dad taught me to do was hear God, listen for God. My dad, my mom, he was a pastor. They talked about hearing God's voice like it was normal. Every day. And so very early, I began to realize, as a Christian, as someone that God was talking. So that left me open to a lot of things. And there were good things, so I served. I'd say, hey, Dad, I feel like I need to go and do this mission trip, or I feel like I need to start this singing group, or I need to go over, and overseas. Okay, son, let's do it. How do we say? And so that environment, so that when, and like you were saying, is that I was called very early into ministry. Now I was a preacher's kid. I did not like what I saw my dad go through as a preacher's kid, but yet still I was a musician, and I thought I love to sing. I had a group that traveled across the country, and we go and very adventurous. Back in the 70s and 80s, driving across country in a station wagon with 5 kids, basically, and CB radios with no money, singing along the way to raise money to go and do a crusade or a youth event. And so, I can't believe my parents let me do that, or the parents of the other kids let me do that. But that's kind of the environment I was raised in. So when it came time in my late 30s, I'm talking late 30s, several things. We had this perfect storm for me personally that I had a business, a good business, a successful business. I had rental properties, not so successful, kind of challenging. I was asking the question, had a daughter that was 3 years old. And I think like a lot of men, we were in church. I was a men's ministry director in my church. I was leading the RAs. I was a deacon. But I came to this point where I'm looking at my daughter, and I'm just, you start to ask the question, how am I going to be a good father, a godly father, right? How can I bring her to know God the way I know? I want her to grow up, right? We do that as men, as fathers. And boy, that took me on this journey of how do I be that man, right? What does that look like? I had no idea where that was going to take me. And the next year or later that year, I had a trip scheduled that I tried to do when I was in college, but I had to delay for 17 years. And it was a trip with a organization called Outward Bound, which is an outdoor, I don't know what you call them. They do experiential education. They do trips, everything from rock climbing, dog sledding in Maine, backpacking, you name it.
Wow. And
I said, you know what? I've got time. I've got a business that's pretty much running itself. I've always wanted to do this. So I went and did this trip. It's about 15 days. Show up in Asheville, North Carolina to meet the crew, and my wife and my little girl are with me to go to the airport. And I walk in, there's this group of people sitting around at the airport, all sitting on the floor. Look like a bunch of, I'm 37, 38 at this time, okay? And I walk in, and there's a bunch of kids sitting there, 20-something kids. I'm like, okay, who are these people? and all of them were girls, except for one guy, 18-year-old kid. And this is the group I'm going 15 days in the wilderness with. My wife looks at me real quick. She puts her arm, she kind of grasps my arm really hard. And she says, who are these people? I said, I don't know. Well, this is the group. Anyway, on that event, on that trip, to make it just as quick as possible, the person that I was on that trip, and I don't know how to explain this, I came home and I told my wife, I said, the person that I was on that, I was hitting on every cylinder I know. My skills, my energy level, my Christian witness, my servant heart, everything. I said, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know what that was. I need to find out more. And so I came home and I planned. I said, you know what? I can do this. I can lead an event like this. I can lead a trip like this. So I immediately scheduled a trip, a commercial trip to the Grand Canyon the next October and started planning it and working on it. And Terry, I led 5 people. I'd never been in the Grand Canyon backpacking. We went into the Grand Canyon on a primitive trail, and I led 6 people into the Grand Canyon. We're hiking down into the Grand Canyon, and there's this one stretch called I think it's called the Devil's Staircase, in which I've got one person that's really struggling with their feet. I got on brand new shoes, hiking, 10-mile hike. And I'm having to constantly adjust their shoes and treat blisters, and everybody's down in front of us. And I can see them all down in front of me. And God just speaks, just clear as day, and says, this is what you're made for. I'm like, well, huh? It was exciting, but then what set in? Wait a minute. Everything I know about being a good man, everything I know about being a good father, a good husband, that makes no sense, God. I got a wife at home. I've got a child at home. How can this be what I'm made for? And I came home and began this journey of trying to figure out what that looked like. Came back to experiencing God with a group of men at my church. We literally come out of the Grand Canyon, go sit down with 12 men and go through a 12-week study called Experiencing God. Again, through experiencing God, if you've not done it, if you've not experienced it, you need to do it. And I came out of that with God saying, hey, I had a call in your life back when you were 17. I haven't let you out of that. Now, by this time, I'd already been in church ministry. I'd already been a music director in church. I'd been a youth leader in church, and it wasn't for me. I did not have the patience. I didn't have the diplomacy skills that my father had as a pastor. And I said, I can't do this. I can't serve in this. But in the midst of experiencing God, I heard clearly, I have a call in your life. Well, like you said just a few minutes ago, what did that mean? And I start writing down, okay, I guess, and Henry Blackaby says, once God calls you, you just need to start making the adjustments to get in position to serve him. Well, you know what my list was? Okay, well, I gotta go back to school, seminary. I gotta, do this. I gotta do this. So maybe I could be I don't know if I want to be a preacher or I'm not really go back. What can I do in the church, right? What's that going to look like? I didn't know. And then, but I said, how can I combine this with what I'm doing now? And so I formulated this whole plan to go to my state, go to the Southern Baptist Convention and present this program that, would be, taking kids backpacking or doing men's retreats. And that was the best I could hope for. And I started farming that, fishing that. But it went deeper and deeper and deeper. And then finally, I had to get, God said, no, I want you in it all the time, full time. And so we went through this really crucial time of getting out of debt, selling out of my business, which was really hard, selling all my real estate, setting a date to start a ministry called New Wilderness Adventures, which comes from, God, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take men out in the wilderness. I love it. It's where I come alive. Okay? I get that. I don't understand it. But can I do it this way? And my dad says, sure, you can do it this way. Just, do it. Right? I'd already been raised, been given permission to go try things.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know what I was doing. I just went headlong into it. And we basically made the decision to leave, start in October of 2001. I left behind my business. I sold off everything, no income except for the buyout of my father and my brother for my business, and started New Wilderness Adventures, which actually comes from Exodus 3:1-4, and Moses being called out. Right? He's called out of the wilderness
to go into the wilderness.
into a new wilderness with Israelites. That's where the name comes from.
Wow, that's awesome. So, is there a childhood memory that you feel like was a sneak peek into what you do now?
Oh, absolutely. There's so many. I mean, as a kid, there were 3 of us boys and 1 girl, and we were preacher kids. So most of the time we lived in the parsonage, and there was always woods nearby. And Mother's rule was in the summer, don't come home till the street lights come on. She didn't want us in the house in the parsonage. So where were we at? Where did we go? We were out in the woods, out, camping. I mean, we camped whole summers in the woods. I think my mom was, they didn't, in those days, it was completely different. We were, of course, there were things, we were swimming in, floods and, swimming through culverts. We were riding our bikes down these crazy hills, sledding on these, just hunting, fishing, climbing waterfalls, backpacking. We didn't know what we were doing back then. And so there was just this open, that was it. I mean, that was our life. Like a lot of kids probably from our era, my era, that they had this freedom. There wasn't the
kind of going on
the world, limiting things of the fear that we have now. And so, that's probably just that atmosphere, that environment. And I grew up to love, being outdoors, and was, just got good at it,
If you used to think back like to your 18-year-old self at 63, what kind of advice would you give yourself now? Oh,
I would tell him it's all going to be good. It's going to be good. I learned a long time ago that we have worry and fear over the 1%, that things that never happen. We get caught up in worry and fear about things that are really never come to fruition. And I would go back, look, just keep going. It's going to be okay. And that was probably the big thing that I would advise myself on, because 18 years old, if I'd have known what I was going to face and what God was going to call me into, I would have said, oh, no.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting how we're on a need-to-know basis. The older I get in my walk, I realize that God intentionally keeps stuff for me, because I will definitely get ahead of him and screw stuff up. And,
I've done that, man. He keeps having to.
Yeah, I'm on a need-to-know basis.
Yeah.
Tell me about the 3 most influential people in your life. What kind of impact have they made?
My father. Definitely one of the most influential people in my life. Probably John Eldridge, who wrote Wild at Heart. Probably in the more recent years, very influential, just in terms of my masculinity and understanding a masculine heart. Just transformative. There's so many authors, that I would name. J.R.R. Tolkien was a big one. C.S. Lewis. And I've never met them, obviously, but they were hugely influential.
Sure.
So,
what do you think the most important lesson at this point in your career has been?
You just said it. Need to know, and trust and faith. I see the blessings. I've got the benefit of hindsight, and something that I've learned: nothing is wasted. Nothing. It's all initiation.
Yeah.
Everything. All my work skills, all my experiences, everything has just been initiation for where I'm at today.
That's such a great way to put it. I've been in 2 or 3 just pivotal moments in my life. And I remember one where all these things were happening and it appeared to be great and people were patting you on the back. And of course, I was carrying the burden of all of that. And what I realized in the middle of that is one day is like God spoke to me and he said, yeah, you're doing all of this stuff that's good, but you're not even doing what I called you to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like, whoa.
That's good. That's good.
And so I went away from that. I eventually transitioned out of that. And it had been 4 or 5 years later, and I would look back on that season of my life, and man, what a waste of my time.
Yeah.
And I get a phone call for something that would change my life forever, working for this organization, and a whole set of really divine events in favor that had got me to that point. And the gentleman sitting across the desk said, we really could use good people like you here.
Yeah.
But this is the only thing that I really have available, because this is what we're wanting to start, this new division. I just started shaking my head, because the new division was what I had spent 3 or 4 years doing with no money, and had a phenomenal impact on it. And I thought it was a waste of time. And I began to tell him, and he said, okay, let's do it. And what was funny is that was the entrance to get me in the door. But I did that 6 months until it moved into the thing that God really had me there to do.
That's good, Terry. That's
and that was pretty powerful. And so, there's never a wasted time. But boy, if we had the self-awareness to know that in the moment, wouldn't that be?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be powerful? One piece of advice you'd give to someone starting out in their career, what would that be?
Man, you got to hear God. Find a way to listen for God. I deal with this every day with young men. And it's hard to convince them that they need it. They really, we have the ability to communicate with the creator of the universe through the Holy Spirit, who is our counselor and our comforter and our guide, and who knows our future, right? Knows our best selves. And right now, my son-in-law is praying. He's got 2 opportunities, and they're really good. And he's sitting there asking my advice the other night, and I'm saying, Hunter, you need this. You're going to need God on this. These are, I don't know how you're going to make this decision without the Holy Spirit. You and Sydney need to pray about it, my daughter. That's my advice. Get in a relationship with God. He's speaking all the time, and he wants to lead us, right? He wants to make our pathways clear. He wants to, make the ground level. Mm-hmm. And he listen to the Holy Spirit. Now, he can correct it if we go in the wrong direction, right? I've been there.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not wasted, but he'd really rather us follow that narrow path. So I would give the advice to the young person, hey, pray, learn how to hear God's voice and listen.
Why do you think that's so difficult just for men in general? Because, you're exactly right. I think when we pull up to a railroad crossing and we're looking at a car, our ability is really, we see what's in front of us, one car at a time. It's our vision is focused on it. But then the Holy Spirit has the ability to see the caboose to the engine and everything in between. And we know that mentally. I think we assent to it. But we don't practice it sometimes. Why do you think it's so difficult for men?
We like to have, we want to do things on our terms. We don't, even though we say we we want controlled adventure. We want risk that we can analyze and consider. We're not really good at something that goes beyond our scope of being able to analyze it. Right.
So we have to trust.
So faith. Yeah. So we have a problem with the faith part. And see, the Holy Spirit, God never calls us in anything that we have control over. Ever.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. Final 4 favorites here. Talk to me about favorite part of your morning routine.
Depends on what morning. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I get my granddaughter, so that's become pretty good just to be with her, love on her, because I enjoy. I hope to be an influencer in her life for years to come. The other is just, man, honestly, I kind of get up with this attitude every day. I don't really have a strong schedule every day. I do, but I have to turn my posture before God, really before Jesus, who is my captain. Okay, I'm yours today. There are things that I need to get done. I need to work on this project or work on this or do this, but if something comes along that you need me to go do, then I'm going to trust that you fill in the gaps. So it's just a posture I take with, that I'm available to you for whatever.
Sounds like a pretty adventurous life.
It is. It can be frustrating at times because I need to get things done. But literally, Terry, I have to turn things over to God completely. If I'm, right now I'm working on a big project in our guide training curriculum. We're converting it to all online. Well, imagine taking all these resources and hanging them into a curriculum. And it's taken a lot of face time on a computer and entering in all the information, pulling in the videos, the audios, the documentation, and putting it all in one place. And I just like yesterday, I'm like, I need to get this section done. And, I get a phone call from a guy who's needs, ministering to, or I get I need to make a call to one of our, other directors or, so it's like that. Or my daughter calls, say, hey, I need lunch. Right. Can you bring me lunch at office? Cause I haven't been able to get away. Well, I'm not, yes, honey, I'll bring it to you.
Yeah.
So I can't really say that that's really my favorite position with God is, hey, I used to be completely different. I used to be hard driving, don't get in my way. I've got a goal. I've got things set, and I didn't treat people well because of it. Certainly not God. So I kind of have this. Yeah, I want to get things done today, but I've learned to pray literally every day. Okay, God, this is really something I need to get done. Can you fill in that gap?
Favorite way to unwind at the end of the day?
This is going to sound just stupid and you aren't going to believe this. I don't generally need to unwind because I'm just blessed in what I do on a daily basis. I get fed all day long through my interactions with men and with, other people. I used to have to really unwind when I was in business, Chick-fil-A, the cleaners, and I would live for going out on the weekends or going things like that. But, I just don't feel that need anymore like I used to because my day is just, it doesn't, I can get drained physically if I spend, you've probably experienced this. If I spend like 5 phone calls a day, with my training with a guy, then physically,
sure,
I'll be depleted.
Yeah.
And I'll have to rest. So,
yeah.
I'm on the couch maybe with my wife watching a show we like or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Same here. I think because I'm somebody else, I'll never retire.
No.
I think if you're kind of in the zone of your purpose, it's when you're out of that.
Steal my thunder, buddy.
Yeah. That's what drains you.
Yeah. You're right.
So,
and I'll talk about that tomorrow. It's your business event is,
That's good. Favorite book that stands out?
A favorite book? Wow. One favorite book. Oh my goodness. I can't really narrow that down to one book. I guess probably in the entirety of my life. And this one of my favorite books is actually a secular book. It's a story about Ernest Shackelford, the Endurance, and how, if you don't know, he was an explorer, and they were trying to find a way. One of the explorers trying to find a way to the pole, and he and his whole crew got stranded on the ice for 3 years, and not one of them died. He and several of his other men literally got in a rowboat and found their way back to England and were able to come back and rescue them. And it's just a great story of endurance. It's a great story of how this man kept these men together for all these years as a leader, did not leave them behind. It's just a really good book.
Favorite magical moment you'll never forget?
Well, the one I told you about earlier, in the Grand Canyon was pretty spectacular, where I heard, this moment where all these things came together. And then I will say the other magical moment, the other spiritual magical moment was years later when I read a quote by Howard Thurman: "Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, because that's what the world needs." Remember my question earlier was, how can I be a good father and a good husband? That's when it all came together. Oh, that's what my wife needs. That's what my child needs. They need me fully alive, which leads to John 10:10, right? The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But I've come that you might have life and have it to the full. Oh,
Nothing
you know,
new
ding,
under
ding,
the
ding,
sun.
ding.
Yeah.
Right. I understand now. My kids need me fully alive. My wife needs me fully alive. That was pretty spectacular. Cyclical logic, you know, well, not logic to me, but, you know, God truth.
That's it. That's good. Best advice you've ever received?
I've gotten a lot of good advice, but one that stands out because this really changed my work ethic. I was when I was with Chick-fil-A. I was actually an employee with Chick-fil-A, and then I moved into being an owner-operator, and I moved from being a manager to actually owner-operator of the same store.
Oh.
Well, my way of working, my way of leadership was lead by example. Okay? I mean, be the hardest worker, you know, be the hardest worker, show them how to do it. Well, that's kind of what I took into my ownership, management. And one day,
Not very empowering though, is it?
Tom Ellington, who was a older Chick-fil-A owner operator, had the best profit, best P&Ls in the company. He comes in one day, he just lives down the street from about 20 minutes. Well, he needs some fries. He was out of fries, got shorted. I said, yeah, you can come, we'll trade out. He comes into my store, right? And I'm out there, and we have ice bins. We have to go back to the machine and get ice. I'm dumping this ice in the ice bins, and my employees are sitting there watching me. He says, Mark. I said, yeah. He said, you can't do that. I said, do what? He said, that's not setting a good example. They'll let you work as hard as you want all day long. You need to learn to delegate. And it was revolutionary. I mean, it was hard because I still had this really deep-seated kind of belief that you led by example. But he showed, and it changed. It didn't just change my business life. You know, it changed my ministry. You know, it helped me begin to see people in different ways, give them opportunities. I was jumping in front of everybody and doing the hard work. And he said, they're perfectly willing to let you work your butt off all day long. And plus, you're not working for minimum wage. It's not a good use of your time.
A lot of leadership lessons in that
there was
conversation, wasn't there?
And I took that lesson and applied it. I began to work hard, but I began to work hard at marketing. I began to work hard, just as hard, but in marketing and out in the community, you know, and very quickly that began to pay dividends in my business.
Yeah,
So,
I think one of the big moments for probably every business leader is when they understand it's more important that I work on this business than I work in it.
That's right.
Or I'm going to be very limited on how far I'm going to be able to grow that. One piece of advice you'd give to our listeners today?
well, it depends on who your listeners are, but I would
They're
give
definitely
advice.
men.
Okay. Well, I was asked this at an interview with WMIT, The Light, and I'll say this is, you know, follow God, listen for God's voice, learn to hear what God's voice sounds like, what it feels like, and then learn to walk and listen with God. Every man wants to be better. I've never met a man that doesn't want to be better. And the only person that I've ever known that holds the keys to that better life is Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's good. I said that. I do know that there's some females that are listening probably because they're trying to encourage their husbands.
Yes.
I know my daughter listens. But sound advice for either sex for sure. If you had to say, if there's one thing that you feel like, and I know this is kind of a deeply personal question, but there's one thing that you feel like now is still holding you back, what do you think that would be?
Oh, that's easy. And I mean, I've run a nonprofit, so money holds us back as a ministry. And it's not so much the money, it's the tool. And some of that comes from maybe, you know, some old holdover beliefs of my own, being a preacher's kid. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Being the son of a father that was raised in a post-depression childhood that probably got transferred to me, you know, and so the attitudes about money and ministry and, you know, and so that a lot of that's a holdover, but probably the one thing that I would say holds, and I was on the plane praying about that this morning, you know, just in writing out things, Lord, I don't want to be in the way of your provision because what you're calling me to is beyond. I mean, I've given my entire life to what I do. Everything. I could not calculate the amount of financial contribution I've made unto my own ministry. I don't know how to do that in terms of skills, abilities, work, vision, planning. And so probably that's one thing in terms of my own personal, I'm okay. But, I've got people that, would benefit from what we're limited by. And one thing that opened me up to that, truly that concept, is for another program, we got a grant last year. And I'm like, wow, we had to use it for a specific thing, but to have that money, that tool was incredible. It was a force multiplier for that program.
That's awesome, because I think sometimes, so many men listening to the show that, maybe they're still trying to figure out what their purpose is.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think guys can be in business in whatever capacity, whether they own it, whether they're leading a group, whether they're diligently working in it and serving, whatever the case might be. I think it's really easy sometimes for people to think, man, I'm just a second-class Christian because I haven't made it over into full-time ministry.
Oh, no.
And, you get over into this realm where you're focusing all your time and energy, but you need the resources that these guys, and that, king and the priest is all throughout the Bible.
Yep.
And, I think a lot of ways that there's a lot of kings, working out in the world that have the resources, and they're exactly where they're supposed to be to fund the gospel.
Absolutely. Good
it's
word.
Just as much purpose. What do you think it means to man up? I like to ask that with every guest on this, but what do you think that means? What does that mean to you?
Well, I told you when I was looking at my 3-year-old daughter and my wife and asking the question, basically, how am I going to be the man how am I going to raise this child? How am I going to, provide for my wife? How am I going to show them to be, to what it is to be godly? And I'd already been through Promise Keepers. I'd already done Men in the Mirror. I'd already done Robert Lewis's, Modern Day Nights. I'd all done all those things and had failed miserably. And pretty much all the all the promises, all the tips and techniques, all the things. And as I told you, what I heard God say, and if you want to, I went to the first thing I did, I was telling your son this today, is the first thing I did is I went to the Gospels and I said, if I want to learn about being a godly man, I better look at the perfect model of a man. And I began to read the Gospels and read and pay attention to Jesus.
Wow. Man, that's some great advice. I think sometimes we have such a distorted view of who God is when the Bible talks about Jesus came to be the exact expression of the Father. When you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Yeah. And then you study the Gospels and it's like, he wasn't making people sick. He wasn't killing people. He wasn't cursing at people. What an example. If we could just get that, man, what an influence that would have on everything that we do in our life, parenting and everything in between. As we begin to wrap this up today, how do you want to be remembered? What's Mark Folk want to be remembered for?
I want to be remembered that I loved well, I lived well, and I led well.
Love, live, and led. That's awesome. Flip the script. What one question would you ask me today?
What is your passion?
That could be a long answer.
Well, you run the show.
I guess we could extend the time. I'll tell you probably one of the most recent things that God has spoke to me in the last few years of where I was at.
Okay.
Is that, part of my purpose is helping other people discover theirs.
Wow.
And I think that's really helped me settle with where I'm at. And settle not mean just being complacent, but being content that I'm where I'm supposed to be doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And now I'm not serving time and looking for opportunities. What I'm doing is carrying out a purpose. Yeah. And that's a driving force. I think just, you relate to this. The older you get, I think the more you begin to reflect on, there's probably more time behind me, obviously, than there is in front of me. So I can't do anything about what I've wasted or the mistakes I've made in the past, but what can I do with what's in front of me? I had 6 grandkids. I have goals, to see them married and to see them have
grandkids?
kids. Yeah.
Wow.
And part of my goal is, to live long enough to see them get married and them have kids. And, my family historically has got married very young. So that's possible. I've got 6 grandkids. I've been married 38 years and I'm only mid-50s, so it's possible.
Yeah. You're better than I am. I'm 63 with 1 grandchild.
Wow. Well, as you can't even begin to put in words. I don't think you're smart enough to be a parent until you're old enough and have enough experience to be a grandparent, and then hopefully you can still help mentor your kids. But
that's good too.
But yeah. How has your understanding of success changed over the years? At 63.
Oh, it's tremendously different than when I was 25, 35, 40, even, it was all about security and having the things that I wanted and securing my future. And now you know what? I feel successful now. I have 2 great daughters that, that are just, they're great. I can't get much better than that. I actually heard the Lord say one time, well done on raising my kids. I've got a wife who loves her work, who thrives, who just enjoys what she does. And I get to talk to guys every day about God.
Yeah.
And to hear tremendous testimonies and stories every single day. I just, I'm just in a great place.
Yeah.
I really am excited.
Yeah. I feel like the greatest legacy that I will leave will be my children. We got married at such a young age. We had kids at a young age. And I tease, but it's so true. We all grew up together.
Yeah.
And somehow in spite of ourselves.
Yeah.
We just have amazing kids, which now are producing amazing grandchildren. And, just the trajectory of what all that means is exciting. So rapid fire, we'll just do some fun questions as we kind of bring this thing to a close. What's your 2 biggest pet peeves?
Oh my gosh. My 2 biggest pet peeves, probably anybody that calls me Bud, which is
good to know.
Synonymous in the South. That's a big pet peeve. And the other is probably, I hate to say it, drivers that don't drive the way I want them to.
Well, I won't ask you about your trip over here from the airport because I've ridden with that.
That was great. I didn't have to drive.
If you had to eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
That I can't answer that one.
Would it be grits? You're from the South.
No, hey, you're not that far away. No, I don't have a single. I used to really, food used to be a big deal, but it's just not so much anymore. So just sustenance.
Okay.
Honestly.
If you could have coffee with one historical figure, who would it be?
Oh my gosh. One? If I got to pick one?
One.
Come on, Terry. One guy, one person. Well, the obvious one would be, but I'm going to get to meet with him in heaven. So historical, I'd really like to sit down with somebody like C.S. Lewis or some of his cohorts.
Time travel. Would you go to the past? Would you go to the future?
Oh, well, I know the future, so I probably just from pure practical, I would have gone back in time and invested in some things that I saw go by me.
Yeah,
maybe back in the 70s. Would have taken care of the whole money issue.
Yeah. Learned so much.
I've done the rich uncle exercise, so to speak.
Hindsight's 20/20, isn't it?
Yeah.
Man, Mark, it was so good to have you on the show today. I know you just flew in, you just drove over and squeezed in at the last minute. I know our listeners are going to enjoy this as much as I did. And I appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming just to invest back into, guys this weekend. For some of you that are listening, we're doing the Ripple Effect tomorrow. And really, the whole event is something that we've just tried to give back. So it's definitely a negative for everybody from a financial standpoint. We're investing our time and our resources, but we also know the impact of what a ripple can do. So if you think about throwing a rock into a pond, it's not just the splash, it's the ripple circles that continue to go out. And I know you're coming to be a part of that tomorrow, which is why you're in town. And I'm so pleased. I hope we can collaborate to try to even make the Man Up Adventure Camp this year more of a success. We haven't had much of a chance to talk about that, but I hope we can before we get out of here. But again,
I'm always available when it comes to men and ministry. So
awesome. Well, we're going to have a great time. So anyway, great to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Terry.
Appreciate all of you guys listening today. Just like, share, follow us wherever you're consuming this content. Help us get the word out to more men. And we'll see you next time on the Man Up Podcast. Hey, Terry Gwaltney here from the Man Up Podcast. Listen, I just want to tell you how much we appreciate you supporting the podcast, listening to it. We hope it's adding a ton of value to your life. Also want to ask you to do us a favor. If you could like and share this podcast on wherever you consume your social media content, whether that be YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, we would appreciate it. It just helps us get the word out so we can help more people. And maybe you've never experienced the Man Up Adventure Camp that we do in October. You can check out our Facebook or our website, manup-camp.com. Once again, I want to thank you for listening to the Man Up Podcast, and we'll see you soon.